I'm Simon Armitage, I'm a poet, and I've been looking through the poetry shelves here in Waterstones. You usually find me in the poetry corner, not just looking for my own books, but looking for books that are particular favourites of mine. And I've picked three that sort of really span poetry's entirety in some senses, but also span my interest in poetry as a writer. So this is the Odyssey. It's one of the foundation texts of Western literature. 2 or 3 or 4 thousand years old. We don't really know what its origins are, even if there were an author called Homer, or whether that's just kind of some tradition. But I suppose what I admire about the Odyssey is that it's incredibly authored. It starts in the middle of the story, it jumps back to the beginning, and then all the strands move towards this grand finale, this violent and climactic ending to Odysseus's journey back home. But what people forget about it, I think, when they're talking about it sometimes, is it's a poem. Look, it doesn't even reach the right-hand margin. It's a grand narrative, but it's a poem. And this edition, I think, is particularly interesting because despite the age of the poem, this is the first ever translation, as far as I understand, by a woman, by Emily Wilson. So it's incredibly readable, quite a sort of a modern, engaging translation of the text. And I didn't read this book until I didn't read the Odyssey until I was in my mid-20s, but it's a kind of foundation text for me as well. All of poetry sits partially on that book. This is Ted Hughes's Poetry in the Making. It's a handbook of poetry, a kind of how-to guide to writing poetry and to reading poetry. And I think I'm right in saying that it was originally written as a series of radio broadcasts and aimed at teachers and pupils, probably secondary school age, just a guide to some of the fundamental ideas in poetry. But it still makes absolute sense to me as a published writer, a writer of some 30 years experience. And every now and again I feel as I've forgotten some of the some of the fundamental principles, and I go back to this book. It tells you things like, if you're writing about an object or a landscape, don't just see that as observation. Try and think what it might be like to actually be that landscape and be that object. Just get inside the subject matter. And I suppose going right from the very beginning to something near where we are now, this is a book of poems called Everyone Knows I Am a Haunting by Shivani. I don't know whether it's Ramla Chan or Ramla Khan. I've never heard her name pronounced, but in the way sometimes you will go into a record shop and you pick up an album, if there were still albums as much as there used to be, and you look down the list of the song titles and you just know it's going to be a great record because they're great titles. And that's true in the case of this book. These are titles like A Nursery of Gods for My Half-White Child and The Abortionist's Daughter Declares Her Love. She's a Trinidadian poet and writes about Caribbean culture in relation to the modern world, what it's like to be a part of that culture, what that culture expects of women, and ways of behaving in the contemporary world. It's very non-binary, it's very transgressive, and the poems are incredibly ritualistic. The language is semi-biblical on occasions, but the poems all feel to me like little ceremonies. I don't remember as being as sort of excited and shocked on occasions by a book of poems for quite a long time.